Hello, Year 3, and welcome to Tuesday's literacy lesson. So, following on from yesterday's lesson, and like I said in this morning's greeting message, you are going to start writing your Professor Pete story today, or the name of whoever you come up with as your character. So, my character is called Professor Percy. Hopefully you'll remember what your character's name is. But yes, today we're going to start writing our story. We're not going to write it all today. We're going to start it today and we're going to finish it throughout the week. Okay, so what you are going to need for today's lesson is you are going to need your story map that you came up with last week, your character description, and your setting description that you wrote yesterday. Okay, so if you've not got those things, pause the video now and go and grab them because you're really going to need them today. Okay, so hopefully you've got those now. And today we are going to start writing our descriptive story. Okay, so what you are going to need to do is following BCOP like we always do. You're going to need to clearly punctuate your sentences. You're going to need to include your setting and character description, which you've already basically come up with. You've got all those ideas. So this will make writing your story today a little bit easier, okay? You're going to include a range of openers. You're going to include conjunctions and double adjectives, which you've got so good at doing last term. And I'm sure you're going to do a really good job today as well. Now, I know it's really strange to sit down and do writing at home. It's not like concentrating in the classroom, is it? So I want you to just give it your best go. If you need to take a break and then come back and do it a little bit later on, you can. Okay, but today we're just writing the start of the story. All right? So hopefully throughout the week you have memorized our Professor Pete story, because that will help when we are writing, because we can get the ideas from our Professor Pete story that we really like and use them in our own writing. And it helps with the structure. If we're stuck with what to write next, you should remember the actions to your Professor Pete story. You'll be like, oh, I know what's next. And then you know what the action is next, okay? So hopefully you've done really well at listening along with Mrs. Hedger and reading the story each day. But I'm going to read the start of it now just to refresh your memories, okay? So it says, crash. The amazing silver time machine landed with an almighty thud. Carefully, Professor Pete opened the door before stepping out into the street. He looked around in amazement. The ground was covered in rubble, while the sky was filled with grey smoke. Where had he landed this time? At that moment, he heard a booming voice from behind him. What are you doing out in the open? Didn't you hear the siren? Professor Pete turned quickly and saw a man dressed in a long black coat and a domed metal helmet. Get into the shelter now, he roared. Pete had no idea what was going on, but he thought he should do as he was told. Quickly, he ran with speed down some steps which led to the underground trains. Now that's all we're going to write today. Those are the parts we're going to write about. So it's not much writing, okay, but it will make a good start on your story. So here is my story map. Hopefully you'll all have your story maps in front of you. And this is what I'm going to be looking at today to structure my writing. So I am going to start with the time machine. So there's my time machine crashing into the ground. Last time we spoke about Professor Pete, he was all the way back in ancient Egypt, wasn't he? Okay, but this time, boom, he's landing into World War II. Then I am going to introduce my character. So this is Professor Percy. He's a very quirky man. Some of you might remember him from our Professor Pete story in ancient Egypt. He was one of the characters we looked at, okay? So I am going to choose Professor Percy, okay? And he always looks so confused because he doesn't know where he landed. Then I'm going to go on to, what do you think I'm going to write next, looking at that picture? I am going to describe my setting. I am going to describe what I can see or what I can hear, looking at the rubble on the ground, looking at all the smoke around us. So that is where I'm going to describe the setting. Then I'm going to go and talk about this person. Does anybody remember who this person is? He is the air raid warden, isn't he? He is in charge with getting people into their shelter, into safety when the siren goes. Okay, so he is in this story a little bit angry that Professor Pete, Professor Percy, hasn't got to shelter whilst the air raid siren is going off. So he is coming into the story in this part. And then it goes to the part where Professor Percy is about to run down the stairs into the underground station. Okay, that is what I'm going to write about today, and I'm going to follow this structure to help with my writing. So I did a little bit of writing before I filmed this. I don't think you'd want to sit and watch me write. It might be a little bit boring for you. I've pre-written it. I'm going to go through it now. I'm going to see if it's any good, if I have followed my success criteria, okay, just like you are going to do today. So just a reminder, we're going to follow the VCOP that we looked at yesterday. Varying our conjunctions, varying our openers, and looking at punctuation and really good vocabulary. So I've got this piece of writing here. Now, part in the black writing I have written today. The writing in the blue colour, okay, is what I wrote yesterday. If you watched yesterday's literacy lesson, hopefully you did. This is what I wrote yesterday, okay? So we're not going to worry about that part because that's what we did yesterday. So we're just going to worry about today, the black writing. So I'm going to read it to you now. Crash! With an almighty thud, the enormous silver time machine landed on the ground. Cautiously, Professor Percy stepped out into the street and looked around in amazement. He was dressed in green camouflage clothing, as well as wearing chunky back boots on his feet. Around his neck hung a pair of binoculars, which he uses to explore his new surroundings. Okay then, so what I want you to do is I want you to pause this video now and looking through those few sentences there, see if you can spot our VCOP. So see if you can spot some double adjectives or some really good pieces of vocabulary that you like. If you can spot any conjunctions, if you can spot any openers, and finally, if you can see some good pieces of punctuation. Okay, so pause it here now and have a skim through and see what you can find. So hopefully you found some really good examples. As you've probably noticed, I've used some words that were in our original Professor Pete story, and that's because I've memorized it really well. So you can use some ideas you really well. So firstly, can anybody spot any double adjectives? What double adjectives did you spot? Well, I can see I've done enormous, silver, so that's how I describe the time machine. Green, camouflage, that's how I describe the clothing. Are there any others? Oh, chunky black. So I've described his boots as chunky black boots. Super. So what about openers then? Firstly, can you remember what our 3 different types of openers are? If you can, I'll be so impressed. Well, hopefully you remember that it is, we've got adverb openers, we've got position openers, and we've got time openers. So our adverb openers tell us how, our position openers tell us where, and our time openers tell us when. Okay, so first opener, with an almighty thud. I am telling you how that time machine landed on the ground. It landed on the ground with an almighty thud. Are there any other openers I've used? Cautiously. I've used cautiously, haven't I? What kind of opener is that? It's an adverb opener, isn't it? And it ends in ly, which is what you were looking at last week in your spellings, weren't you? So cautiously. Super. So I'm telling you that Professor Percy stepped out. He didn't step out really bold and really excited. He stepped out cautiously. He wanted to be careful and check. Where was he? Where had he landed? He was being very cautious. Have you used any other openers? Around his neck. And what kind of opener is that? It's a position opener, isn't it? It's telling us where those binoculars are. Those binoculars are not on the ground. Those binoculars are not on his head. Those binoculars are around his neck. Super. What about conjunctions then? So my first conjunction I've used is and. We use and a lot, don't we? So I've used and to extend that sentence. Can anybody spot any other conjunctions? I've used as well as, haven't I? And if you remember from yesterday's lesson, as well as was one of my golden star conjunctions, because I love when children use as well as, so I've done a really good job of including that one. Are there any others? Which, there's another one, and I've varied them, haven't I? And, as well as, and which, and they are all there to extend our sentences, to add a little bit more information. So what pieces of punctuation have I included then? Have I got capital letters and full stops? Yeah, we need to include them, don't we? So I've remembered a capital letter at the start of my sentences and a full stop at the end of my sentences. What other pieces of punctuation have I got? I've got my commas in between my double adjectives, haven't I? Fantastic. So we need to remember them, don't we? So remember our commas between our double adjectives. I've also got this piece of punctuation here after crash. What's that called? An exclamation mark. Super. And can somebody tell me why I have included an exclamation mark there? Why have I not just put a full stop? Can you tell me? Fantastic. So I'm really emphasizing the crash. It's a loud noise, isn't it? I'm putting a lot of emphasis on that, and that's why I included big exclamation mark. Super stuff. So going through our success criteria then. Have I included my BCOP? I have, haven't I? And we've highlighted them. Have I included a character description? Green camouflage clothing and black boots, and he has binoculars around his neck. That's helping you visualize Professor Percy if you read this story. Have I included a setting description? I have, haven't I? Because this is what I wrote yesterday, and I used all the amazing ideas I came up with yesterday and put it into my story. So I've written, smothering him was thick grey smoke that he could smell from even inside the time machine, coming from the demolished, burnt-out buildings. Slowly, he steps out onto the rocky, debris-covered road, which crunched beneath his feet with every step he took. Covering his ears, Professor Pete couldn't concentrate with the unpleasant, thundering siren noise repeating and a noise of people shouting, crying, and shoveling away the rubble. Was that an air raid siren? Just then, he began to understand where he was. Oh, can anybody spot what Miss Cullen has done wrong in this? I've repeated something, and that's just because I wasn't looking at what I wrote yesterday. Anybody spot what I've repeated? I've repeated the same thing. So hopefully you spotted that I have put up here, Professor Pete stepped out onto the street, and up here I put slowly he stepped out. So he stepped out twice. So that is what our editing is for, to read through and make sure we don't repeat ourselves. Okay, so that's something we can actually edit in our Friday lesson. So the next part of my story opener, so we'll whiz through this one. So looking at my story map, I have done landing in our time machine, I have done my character description, and I've done my setting description. Next, we have got our air raid warden, haven't we? And then we are going to run to the steps. So, all of a sudden, a loud, demanding voice called from behind him. What are you doing out here on the street? You need to get to safety. Now! Turning to see where this voice was coming from, Professor Percy saw a man dressed in a long black coat and a domed metal helmet. He seemed very important, so Pete did as he was told and rushed towards the steps on the other side of the street. Editing again, he's not called Pete, he's called Percy. That is why it's important to read through your work 3-2 and 3H and 3K. Okay, so looking through this now, I want you to pause this video for me, and I want you to see, just like we just did, whether you can spot any double adjectives, or sometimes just one adjective, any openers, and any conjunctions. So pause this for me now and see what you can spot. Okay, hopefully you have spotted a few things we have included here. So what double adjectives did you spot? Loud, demanding. So I've described his voice. It was loud and demanding. Are there any others? Long black, who is dressed in a long black coat. Also, a domed metal helmet. So I've included some more double adjectives in this. Have I included any openers? I've got all of a sudden, turning to see where this voice was coming from. Okay, so I have told us when something happened all of a sudden, and then told us what he's doing. He's turning to see where this voice was coming from. And then I've also included some more conjunctions and so. Okay, so that is what you are going to do today. You are going to write your start of your descriptive story, including the amazing setting and character descriptions you have already come up with, and including your VCOP techniques. Okay, if you need to, you can go all the way back and have a look at this, because this will tell you what kind of things you need to include. Also, you have your catch-up packs. You remember those packs we sent home with you quite a while ago now? And there's some resources in there that might help you with your writing. We use some of those resources in class, so that might help you when you come to write your story today. Okay, but you've got my example here, and you have also got your story maps to help you with your structure. Okay, so remember, you can use some of the ideas from the original Professor Pete story, but you can also come up with your amazing new ideas. Your new character, what your character actually looks like, what you can see. Perhaps you can see different things, okay? So that is what we are going to do today. So this is what we want you to send in to us today, okay? So once you've written this, I want your grown-ups to take a picture and send it to us so we can have a look at your amazing writing. Okay, remember, I know it's very strange to be doing some writing at home, but we really want you to try your best, and that's all you can do as long as you try your best, all right? So I'm really looking forward to reading these, and I will be back tomorrow with another literacy lesson, which is continuing our story, okay? So have a great time writing, and like I said, I can't wait to read them. Bye.